Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Bricks and Banter, the Cope & Co podcast. I'm here today with Beth and Laura, who are going to introduce themselves. My name's Annie, if you didn't watch episode 1. And today we're going to go through a few bits, including the spinning wheel this time, which we haven't done yet. And also discuss rent guarantee and maybe touch on some other tenants and landlord insurances. Excuse the dog. I didn't have a choice today but to bring him in. It wasn't the plan for a podcast, but he is an avid member of the team, so he's just here. So just go with it. So who wants to introduce themselves first?
You go first.
Okay, so I'm Laura Clark. I'm head of client accounting, and I've been here for nearly 12 years. So yeah, it's the first time on the pod. Very excited.
Sorry, can you refrain?
You're being recorded.
No, hon.
That was my moment, and you're stealing it. You're stealing my moment.
He is the moment.
So, day to day then, Laws, what does your role kind of include?
So day to day, I start off by receipting all the rents that have come in, and paying the landlords, applying invoices for works that have been carried out. Obviously, they get deducted from the rent in order to pay the contractors. So yeah, that's the sort of primary job in the morning, get that done and out the way. And then probably get on to chasing some rents, some tenants that have, if they've not paid, get on to them, find out what the latest reason behind it all is. So
we'll touch on that a bit as well. Some of the funniest reasons we've heard. But
obviously I deal with things as well like registered deposits. Obviously that's a legal requirement, so we have to ensure that they're registered within 30 days of receipt. So obviously that's something that's important to keep track of. And compliance as well. I deal with the compliance in the company. So making sure your gas safety is up to date, your EICR, EPCs, etc. So yeah.
Just a small
no
role.
pressure. Yeah, pressure.
No pressure. Beth?
I'm acting head of lettings, so I work very closely with Annie and Laura as well, overseeing lettings from viewings, putting properties on the market, picking it up after valuation until it lets, really. I'm, as I say, working very closely with these two ladies.
Yeah, we recently had a landlord that was really concerned that you were acting head of lettings because he was like, where's she going?
A very lovely landlord as well.
Yeah. So at the moment, Beth is acting head of lettings because Kelsey, how long has Kelsey been here?
Kelsey came not long before I got married, so I would say just over 9 years.
Yeah, 9 years. So she has recently had a baby, so she's on maternity at the moment. So Beth was acting head of lettings, and then Beth decided to get pregnant, which is great. They've thankfully aligned. I think they've probably had a chat and said, well, I'm going to potentially come back then, so if you want to go off.
My bit there's done, by the way. That's done and dusted.
Your time. It's your time. You go.
You go now, girls.
But you also kind of man alongside Jane, the renewals and rent increases, which I think we'll touch on as well. Just because of obviously rent inflations and stuff recently.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We'll touch base a little bit on that. First thing I just want to have a bit of a chat about, and I think because it's been so prevalent probably since COVID, and even so now with cost of living and everything else, and I think we're all of the opinion that so many landlords still overlook the importance of rent guarantee.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And the cost, because it's a monthly cost, I think they see it as another fee, and whilst we appreciate fees are high, everything costs these days, I think it'd be good to actually explain to people what rent guarantee is, and maybe some of the recent experiences that we've had of people that haven't got it, that have openly said to us, I wish that I had it, or I wish that I hadn't cancelled it, because we have had genuine experiences of that. So I think we'll start with you, Laws, because obviously you work with it on a day-to-day, you kind of man that bit anyway. And maybe me and Beth will learn something about it. But no, just so that we can...
Maybe you could, be ways to sell it a bit more.
New ways,
you can use the stories that I've got. So
yeah, because the selling of it, we find it in lettings, it's so hard. The team find it so hard. Because I think obviously at the start when you're going through, obviously they know what their fees are. So it's like, we've let it for you. And I think in the back of people's landlords' minds, they have got, I've got this fee. And then you're kind of saying, do you want the rent guarantee adding on? And I think sometimes all that comes across as is, oh yeah, but that's another £25.
And they also, I think a lot of landlords as well, they do have that mindset like, oh, that won't happen to me.
It's the same
Or,
excuses we get from the landlords.
They see the references and they think, well, they've both got really good jobs, you know, why wouldn't they pay? But that's not always the case.
No. And they wouldn't be moving in if they didn't have good references, would they? So,
no. So, Loz, can you just give kind of like an overview of rent guarantee?
Yeah.
And then maybe and how it works. Maybe we'll touch on a couple of stories, and then we can maybe go into, because I know we had one recently about the void period bit that the majority of other rent guarantee policies don't have, and I think a lot of landlords don't realise that it is offered, and maybe we'll delve into that a little bit more.
Yeah, okay. So rent guarantee, so it covers you for a number of things. So most importantly, it's not just your rent either, which a lot of landlords don't realise. So obviously it's a cover which will protect you against rent arrears, legal possession of the property, court costs, even down to the bailiff if the tenant doesn't leave. So the way it works is you put a claim in within 30 days of arrears. So say, for example, your rent is due on the 1st of November and the tenant hasn't paid. We have to be seen to be chasing it at 7 and 14 days, which would be standard practice anyway. We would always do that for any landlord. But then it's sort of, you know, another week passes and we've still had no luck. So at that point, I generally put the claim in. So it's lodged, it's there. If the tenant pays, then great, you can close it down. If not, then the insurance company have got everything that they need in readiness for when the next rent becomes due, so the 1st of December. So at that point, when a second one becomes due, that's the point that they pay out. So they always pay monthly in arrears, but at that point when the second rent becomes due, you've got 2 months of arrears, so they'll serve a Section 8 notice. So that is for possession on mandatory grounds. So unless the tenant pays and brings the account, even if they just pay a very short amount, if they bring it very slightly under that 2 months, then of course you can't rely on your Section 8. So it may always be worth doing a Section 21 as well. Yeah. If it's important for the landlord to actually get possession of the property as well as just getting the rent, it's always prudent to serve the Section 21 because then you've got that to fall back on. So that's obviously the 2 months notice, but you know, you wait a little bit longer. So Section 8, it's 14 days notice. If you don't pay these arrears, then you must vacate the property. And if you don't, then you'll be taken to court. So on the 1st of December, they'll pay out November's rent. They'll do the Section 8 and they'll get underway. So it's all, you know, it's a great team that obviously we work with at Let Alliance.
Sorry, have you got something to say about rent guarantee?
Good idea.
He doesn't like naughty payers, so I'm with him on that one. So yeah, they're a great team. Obviously, we've worked with them for a long time, so we've got a good rapport, good client relationship with them. So yeah, I can't tell you many cases where the tenants have actually paid, and then we've had to close the claim down.
Yeah.
So it generally does go right through to court. So
I think that's a bit that sometimes landlords don't consider as well, is obviously, so we only offer rent guarantee to fully managed and rent collect landlords, don't we? So if you're self-managing, it's not something that we can offer, obviously, because we have no sight of the accounts, we have none of that information in order to process the actual claim. But aside from having the insurance, the time that it would take someone to process a claim themselves, and we have it sometimes where landlords will say to us, oh well, I've got rent guarantee with Direct Line. Not just Direct Line, but Direct Line is the really common one.
Not throw shade on Direct Line,
but no shade to Direct Line.
Other providers are available.
But me and you have sat down quite a few times and actually had a look at their policy, and in recent years I do think they have improved it, definitely since COVID. We noticed, didn't we, that they have bulked it out quite a lot. But we've also had it recently where a landlord wanted to rely on their rent guarantee, didn't put their claim in time, because if you've got a busy life, you've got a family, you've got kids, you've got a full-time job, hence why you've chosen the fully managed service, where all of a sudden are you going to find the time to put this huge claim through with all the evidence that you need? So I think that's the other side of it. I know if I was a landlord, the last thing, if I'm already frustrated that my tenants haven't paid rent, I then don't really want to spend however many hours trying to put a claim
because
together.
obviously they do ask for a lot of information. You know, it's not just a case of like, they've not paid, can you get underway with this? You know, there is a lot of documentation that you have to provide, and then there's a lot of things in terms of did they pay a holding deposit? If so, how much? Because they need to make sure that you've not exceeded the
what are the references?
The cap. is the deposit protected? What date did they pay? Who paid it? You know, you've got to know the answers to all of those questions. So, you know, a lot of landlords would think, well, I don't know that information. So, you know, having an agent that can do that all for you.
Yeah.
And also there's no excess to pay either, which, you know, a
lot
lot of providers.
Yeah.
And generally, you know, you're not talking a small excess amount, you're talking a large excess. But yeah, a lot of landlords, they think that they have the cover with their own provider.
Yeah.
And okay, they might pay the rent side, but then they won't pay the legal costs, which, okay, you might be down a couple of months' rent, which is a huge chunk, but then to add on, you know, you're talking in the £1,000 region that it's going to cost you to get that property back. So yes, you can put the cost back onto the tenant, and the judge will award those costs. But you know, if you can't afford to pay your rent, then who's going to say you can afford to pay those costs back, although it's been ordered?
Yeah, because that's the point, isn't it? It's all like going to court and claiming the money.
Yeah.
But if someone hasn't got the money to pay, then it's pointless.
So,
I think the point about, I mean, we give this advice quite a lot as well in lettings. The point about serving a Section 21 in tandem with a Section 8, I think from my experience, from what landlords have told me, a lot of agents don't advise or don't think of advising. And I mean, if there's rent arrears involved, there's no reason why you just wouldn't serve them both at the same time. Because like you said, the alternative is you serve the Section 8 with the 14 days notice. For some reason or any reason that doesn't come to fruition, and then you serve in 2 months notice. If you do it all from the outset, you're already a month into that. You know,
and
what I mean?
delay the process. There's no point, no benefit
and also,
to doing
like,
that.
I know landlords, the priority it is to get the rent. So, you know, you might think, I'll serve a Section 8, if I get the rent, then great. But then also, you've then got that sort of that relationship tarnished between tenant and landlord, and where's the trust, and who's to say it's not going to happen again. So I think at that point it's just, your tenant hasn't paid, let's go through the eviction process, let's get them out, we'll get you a new tenant, and
and lightly increase the rent,
massively increase the rent, and you know, just ensure you have your rent guarantee in place. So yeah, it's massively important, and you know, it does make my job a lot easier.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing. Obviously, we have a vested interest in encouraging people to take it out.
Yeah.
And, you know, against probably popular belief, it isn't because we get a kickback, very open and honest. Of course, we get a kickback, we use a third party. It's a business, it's how it works. But it's not that. It's the fact that when you're sat in property management or when you're sat in lettings and you've got a landlord who's maybe mortgage has gone skyrocketed, or the rates have gone up so high that they're panicking about the fact that their tenant may not pay rent. The fact that you can just say to them, look, worst case scenario, you've got the rent guarantee, and like you said at the start, it's not just your rent, it's also the court proceedings, it's us dealing with it for you from the outset. And I think the other thing that people don't realise, manual repossession, what's that now? $750 plus VAT.
Yeah, but then
accelerated is 1,100 plus VAT. I think the last one we dealt with. It's someone had to pay out for.
But that's just, there's other charges that's just the start, because then obviously if they've got a defence, and then there's more work that goes into it, there's more costs involved. So it's not just always a straightforward process. It's not just like a one-off fee that you pay and you're going to get your property back. There's a lot more behind it. So knowing that you've got everything covered, and you know, you go to court and the judge will say, generally it's a 14-day order for possession. So you go to court, you get your 14-day order, and then if the tenant still doesn't leave after 14 days, you then apply for a bailiff. So a bailiff can take up to about 6 to 8 weeks. So the application goes in, you've then got to wait. So there's another 6 to 8 weeks that you're not getting rent. And with rent guarantee, they pay right up until you've got vacant possession of your property. So you've just got that peace of mind that while all of this is going on, you're still getting your rent and everything's
your finances are sound, basically.
Yeah.
And, you know, on the flip side, we have had landlords before where they want the property back, no fault of the tenant. Maybe they're selling, or a family member needs to move back in and they've served notice, and the tenant hasn't had anywhere to go. So we claim for possession side. So tenant's paying the rent absolutely fine, but they need possession of the property. So we have had a couple of those cases, and landlords have just had that peace of mind that it's not going to cost them thousands of pounds, although they're getting the rent. It's not going to cost them thousands of pounds to get the property back.
Yeah.
Can we just touch slightly on the rent increases? I know it was just slightly mentioned. And obviously maybe to touch on a base of a few reasons as to why. Obviously we're getting a lot of kickback at the moment, aren't we? Understandably, you know, we're not sat here naive to the fact that people are struggling for money and everything else, but I think unfortunately the knock-on effects of everything to do with the economy to landlords, you know, the obvious thing to do is increase your rent. So can you just touch base a little bit on the general process of that? I think it's sometimes quite good if there are any tenants listening and they have had landlords that have tried to increase rent illegitimately. It's, you know, the knowledge for them as well.
Yeah, on the flip side with tenants, because I think sometimes tenants overlook the fact that landlords, they're a business sometimes, or they've only got the one property, their mortgages are increasing. There's a stigma that landlords are really rich, you know, they've got these houses outright, that money is straight into their pocket, and it's just not the case.
No.
So where landlords' costs are going up, unfortunately, they're having to increase the rents, and they're doing it to market rent. They're not doing it to double what the property is worth. It's not something we would ever recommend. I mean, they wouldn't do it, they can't. So from our point of view internally, I work really closely with a colleague, Jane, who she will contact landlords and say your property is in a position to either offer the tenants a renewal, which is a nice way to increase the rent because you're giving both parties security, or, you know, go down just the simple rent increase option. We will ascertain from the landlord how high they want to put that rent up, whether they want to put it to full market rent, or whether for some landlords in certain different positions they want to increase that to a little bit below.
Yeah.
It depends what the tenants are paying now. So they'll negotiate on that. We will contact the tenants to either offer them a renewal. The tenants will agree, or in some cases don't want to renew. We offer them a renewal. They've signed, they want to say, we'll stay, we want to do another 12 months at this price. They're secure in that property at that rent for this amount of time. They don't want to, or the landlords don't want to offer renewal, and we serve a Section 13, which is a rent increase to whatever amount we've all agreed. It's not a case sometimes if a tenant has a genuine concern that they cannot pay that increased rent, we don't just ignore them. We will listen and we will speak to the landlords, raise concerns, because although, you know, if they've got rent guarantee, great, if they stop paying that rent, but we don't ultimately want to put them in a position where they just will not be able to pay that rent. It's not great for anybody.
It defeats the objective of increasing the rent.
I think we have had a lot of, in my opinion, we've had a lot of landlords that haven't actually increased it. We always give the advice of market rent. Or the way that we approach it is look, this is the market rent, but your tenant's been there for 5 years, always paid the rent, looking after the property, you know, there's a balance to how you deal with it. And I mean the odd landlord that's been put in a position by their financial situation where they've just got no choice has said, look, I need the market rent, that's just that's my reality, that I can't do anything about it.
And it's their right to do that as well, ultimately. I
think that's the hard bit, and I think we are definitely seeing a lot more landlords that don't want to go down the renewal side. Because renters refund bill. Our Section 21 is going to go, in which case if they go within the next 12 months and I've got a 12-month tenancy, then what? The fact that they have to pay a renewal fee, which is higher than a Section 13 fee, obviously, because there's a lot more work involved. And I think that's then meaning that we're probably doing a lot more increases than ever outside of a renewal. So like you said earlier, you aren't actually offering something to the tenants, or you're actually saying to them is, look, your rent's actually going up. Which I think that's a lot of the conversation we're having. There's not, at the moment, with less landlords wanting to renew, there's not something in it for both parties, really.
And it is having that honest conversation, because all the time we get the same thing about landlords, and, well, you know, why does that landlord need all that money, you know? And it is that thing where people just think that landlords are made of money, and we get that so often. Once you sit down and have that conversation with the tenant and explain that, but, you know, they have got a mortgage on the property, or, you know, their costs have increased as well, and it's 50-50. Tenants sometimes say, oh, okay, like, you know, I get that.
Sometimes they think lying.
Sometimes, that's not my fault. No, it's not.
No,
but also you're living in a property that you're paying half the rent for.
We do have to remember, though, that a landlord wouldn't rent a property out if it wasn't for some sort of, if it was business related. You know, they need to make a profit from it. Why should they be at a loss?
It's not worth it.
And, you know, if the tenant's not covering their mortgage, then there is actually no point. And then the tenant wouldn't have a roof over their head at all. So the tenants have got to remember that, you know, landlords must make a profit from it.
Well, the rental industry is so important.
Exactly,
it
really
offer,
is.
I mean, not everyone can buy.
No.
I mean, purchasing itself, getting a mortgage and everything else nowadays is harder than it definitely has been in the last, I'd probably say, 5 to 7 years. So if you go down that route and look at it in that sense, the rental industry is so important. But in the same way, I mean, we all know there's not a lot going on in the government to actually keep it, you know, at that stable level. So all these knock-on effects is just something that we're having to deal with day to day.
Yeah.
And I think it is sad, especially this time of year. I mean, we did a rent increase, 2 days ago, that came into force on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
Which is just how it fell. It wasn't, obviously was not intentional, but we were sat there like, this is like how, it is just really harsh.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things. It's a bit like, you know, when you come to reapply for your mortgage and that's gone up by however much. It's the same reality. But I just think it's important to, obviously, for us to be quite open about it. The one thing that I will always say as well is your landlord can only increase your rent once every 12 months. Yeah. Within a fixed period or without, it's once every 12 months and that's it. So just bear that in mind if you ever are served with a Section 13. And obviously there is the first tier tribunal as well. Yeah. So every tenant's got the right to dispute. Yeah. Yeah. If we serve the Section 13 on behalf of a landlord, we will deal with that dispute. Another thing to note, if you serve it yourself, just bear in mind that your agent probably won't deal with that dispute for you, because obviously proof of the Section 13 hasn't been done validly. If when we do it, we know that it's all been done. Yeah. By the book.
And it's always checked as well, isn't it, by another member of staff? Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, and I would always say to people as well, we've had a recent one that all three of us were involved in, a recent first tier tribunal where the tenant wasn't very happy and the rent increase was quite a lot, but it went to market rent. The landlord had been
and
very
they've not
kind.
Had an increase for 12 years.
Landlord had been very kind, but I think that sometimes worsens the blow when you actually do come to increase it, because it's not.
If you'd done it every 12 months, it probably would be at more than what it is that it's increased to. But it's just that it's that blow, isn't it, in one go.
That is something I was going to say. If I was a landlord and everything, like every time I speak to a landlord about a rent increase, I recommend you do it every year, even if you don't want to take it to full market value. Yeah. Do a little bit every year.
It's maintaining that relationship as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because then it's just less of a...
Yeah, we get tenants all the time. I've been in here 5, 6, 7, however many years. They've never increased it. Yeah. And it's those tenants that take it worse. Yeah. Because although you could say, on the other hand, you're very lucky that you've been in there with no rent increase. The rent increases tend to be larger, and landlords think, well, I've not done it for this amount of time, well, I'll do it to full market value. It really upsets the tenants, and while, you know, that is the reality, do it every year.
Until they then go on to Rightmove and realise that
it's worth that.
It is worth that.
Honestly, and rent inflation is just
it's not worth moving out because you're going to be paying the same, if not more, somewhere else. And obviously, by that point, you've made the house your home. So, but back onto the
first tier tribunal. I mean, I think they give the time span of 10 weeks to make a decision. Well, we've just waited 3 months for one. Yeah. In which time the tenant didn't pay their increased rent because obviously they disputed it, which absolutely fine. You've got every right to do so. The first tier tribunal came back and said that the rent that we had tried to implement was correct, and therefore the rent was increasing, and they've awarded it. That tenant's now in a position where they've got 3 months, which if they put it away, which someone sensible would do, but in this day and age, you know, money is everyone's suffering. So that is just another thing that I would say is, if you are going to dispute any rent increase that may have come your way, just make sure that you are putting the increased rent away, because what you don't want then in 3 months' time, especially depending on what time of year it falls now, November coming up to Christmas, you're going to be in a position where you've then got an extra 750 quid or whatever the rent increase times 3
outcome of the tribunal, it's not, you know, it won't come into effect from the date of their decision. It will be backdated to the date that as per the Section 13 notice. So, the one that we're referring to, you know, it's now a few months down the line and the arrears have now accrued. So, the tenant's now unfortunately got to. I think the first tier.
I think the rent officers will be under quite a lot of pressure at the moment, because I would assume that there's a lot more disputes going on because there's a lot more increases going on. Yeah. So, which is probably why it's taken them a good 3 months to actually come back to us. But and we are having a lot of it, aren't we? People saying they want to get legal advice. Yeah. And, you know, at the end of the day, we're a business. We pride ourselves on the service that we offer. And it's not very often, aside from human error, that a mistake is made. But can definitely assure everyone that Section 13s are looked into before actually being served. And I think that's the other frustrating thing, is sometimes I think tenants think we're trying to pull the wool over their eyes, and trust me, it's rent increases aren't nice to do. I think you've kind of wrapped your head around it now, but when you don't do them very often, and then you have to do one and you have to make that phone call, it really isn't the easiest thing to do.
Used to dread making the phone calls when I first started for like the bigger renting.
Well, it's not really nice, is it? To say,
I mean, now
courtesy calls, like, no rent's going on. Oh,
now
thanks.
it's different, but especially this time of year as well. It's
Yeah.
like, because a lot of them, like we say, are coming in Christmas, January. It's
But I know
So
if I was a
to hear it
tenant
today.
and I got a courtesy call before I got that notice, I probably would
yeah.
appreciate that a lot more. So
Yeah.
you know, it's
Yeah,
nice
it's
that we do that
Yeah.
and
part
not
of our
just
process,
hit
isn't
you
it?
with a notice and say
yeah.
your rent is going
FYI.
up.
Yeah.
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 Bam.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So yeah.
And then just kind of circling that back round to rent guarantees. Obviously, if there is a rent increase, obviously we notify our landlords. We notify the insurance company on the insurance
of the new
policy. So
amount.
if you ever did come to claim in 12 months' time and the rent's gone up by £150, for example, the rent guarantee is covered. Obviously, if it goes over the threshold, so rent guarantee is a set price up to £849 a month.
Correct.
Anything £850 and over, it's 3% of the rent. So obviously, if your rent increase takes you over that £850 or above, then your cost goes up monthly.
Yeah.
But it's all proportionate to obviously the fact that there's a rent increase.
I will also point out, back onto rent guarantee in section 13s, if you are a landlord and you do have rent guarantee with us and you choose to do your own section 13, please do make sure that it is valid and correct, because you will have to provide that notice as part of the claim.
Yeah.
If they see that the rent is different to the initial tenancy agreement and no renewal agreement has been done, you do have to provide the section 13
So would
notice.
they award it based on the old rent then, if they couldn't prove that section 13? If they
would've-
couldn't prove the
I
rent
would have thought
increase?
so.
Because that's what the policy
Or-
covers.
Actually, having said that, I suppose like if you've got a rent statement at a new amount and the tenant's
Shows they've
paid
been
that,
paying
then
it.
they've technically entered into that
Accepted it.
agreement, haven't they? So
Yeah.
maybe not, but I would still just always make sure that your paperwork is, squeaky
You never know,
clean.
do you? Sometimes
Yeah.
they come back to us and
Exactly.
say, oh, can you send us this? And
And-
you're like, why? I've never sent you that before.
Yeah, I know the things that they ask for, but it's probably because they find when they go to court that judges, they scrutinise everything, and every judge is different. I've been to many, many court cases,
Yeah.
and I get there and I'll meet an advocate, and they'll say, "Oh, it's Judge such and such day," and I'll be like, "Oh."
I think the thing that people don't realise as well, there is not a allocated housing court, and we've said this so many times, and they are looking at doing it in order to abolish Section 21s. They're looking at sorting all the court system out. So I'd be interested to see what actually comes about from it, because obviously I think people think you go into a court case about Section 21, that judge sat there knows everything about the Housing Act. They don't. Like, trust me, they don't, because they may have dealt with something completely different 2 hours before, and 2 hours later they're going to deal with something else completely different.
Yeah.
So the expectation that you're going to go to court and you're going to have someone that knows the ins and outs of the Housing Act and the ins and outs of the tenant fee ban and the ins and outs of Section 13s is unrealistic. So I think that's the other good thing. Obviously, our rent and guarantee includes a Cope and Co representative will go to court on landlords' behalves, and I think that's always good, so we can have that discussion with obviously our legal representative to be like, what have you thought of this, or has this been covered? Because we're in it day to day, and although none of us are solicitors,
No.
we have got the industry knowledge.
We've got the knowledge,
Yeah.
that
and that's another
people
thing.
may
That's
not
why
have.
they ask for a representative from our company to go,
Yeah.
because they, they're the experts. They're going to do the talking in the courtroom.
Yeah.
But if they want to just say, "Oh, can you just clarify this? Can you just clarify that?"
Yeah.
Just to make sure that they've got everything
You
that
kind
they
of like
need
physical
to know.
evidence.
Yeah,
like
I
verbal
am.
evidence
Yeah.
Like a
constantly
human
there.
version of evidence. So, I'll always take an up-to-date rent statement so that they've got that, because generally a judge will say, "Have you got an up-to-date statement?"
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always good to have somebody from the agent that knows what's been going on.
That
the
knows-
conversations.
knows that tenancy.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much.
the conversations we've been having with the tenant. Why is there rent arrears?
Yeah.
When have we chased it?
Yeah.
And the thing is,
do you have any issues? Is there a reason?
Yeah. And when you have got a more troublesome tenant or tenancy, I should say, those things off the top of your head. It's a bit like when we've got an active issue in lettings, I can turn around to you and say, what's happening with this property? And if it's an active issue, you just know.
Yeah.
That
because-
name.
Yeah.
And it just. Oh, God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, no, well.
What have they done now?
Yeah. Okay, just before we kind of get on to less serious conversations, I did just want to mention Let Simple, because obviously it's something that we offer that a lot of agents don't, especially in our area, which is essentially and I'll get it right because Darren will tell me off, a monthly management subscription. So the whole idea is that you don't have, as I mentioned earlier, landlords thinking, oh, I don't want rent guarantee because of all my fees adding up. We don't refer to them as fees. It's kind of like you sign up to Netflix every month.
Yeah.
You're signing up to the management every month. Are you okay there, Teddy?
Just having a quick stretch.
I don't know if they want to see
Teddy's
that.
chilled. He's got rent guarantee.
He can sit back and relax.
Yeah, so it has to be on a 12-month tenancy. It's basically also really good for cash flow because it means that not all of your fees are up front.
You know what you're getting every month.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And especially it's really aimed towards portfolio landlords. So that's one thing that I will mention, because if you're an accidental landlord, like you mentioned earlier, or you've had to sell a few because of the economy and you're down to one or two, financially it's probably not going to benefit you because of the way that it's calculated. But if you've kind of got 4, 5, 6 properties, just bear in mind the Let Simple is available and the rent guarantee is included in all of our Let Simple alternative business, which is really good. But it includes a lot of things. So if you are a current landlord listening or watching, and you don't know about the Let Simple service, just either Laura or Simon Joyce, or either of us, are probably the best people to just get into contact with, even if you just want to know kind of how it compares to your current fees, etc. But just something to mention. Perfect. Right. Funny stories about rent arrears, late payment of rent.
Yeah.
Or we'll kind of tie it in with also funny stories as to why people can't afford a rent increase.
I've got the opposite, which is going to sound really peculiar, about not rent arrears. My husband paid the rent on our rental property for 3 months after we bought a house.
Yeah, I literally said, if you pay this rent one more time, I am keeping it. I'm not going to keep giving it you back.
3 months.
You'd be surprised how many people don't cancel a standing order.
I know. And it's the same. You've taken my rent. Yeah. So tenants, if you're listening, it's a standing order, not a direct debit. Please cancel your standing order.
Control.
I think that is one of my biggest pet peeves. Like when they come to move in, well, when are you going to take the money out of my bank?
Yeah.
I sit there and I think, you genuinely think I have the authority?
And also,
I'll just take that. I need a tenner.
They don't realise that they haven't actually given us their bank details. We give them ours, but we haven't taken theirs.
So if you're moving out, cancel your standing order.
Yeah. And when the tenants move in, the first one becomes due, and I'll ring them and say, we've not had your first month's rent through. Oh, have you not taken it? No, we haven't.
Doesn't work like that.
I'm not allowed to do that.
And
actually.
also, we give them a standing order mandate. We tell, we give them all the information. They even get a reminder through life cycle. I'm not sure if it's about a week before it becomes due, to say just a reminder that you
pay
your rent. Yeah. So it is a funny one. Again, with rent increases, you've not paid the new amount. Oh, have you not amended it? No, we can't do that.
I wish we could.
Honestly, I wish we could.
Yeah.
It would be so much easier rather than just chasing for an extra £25. The funniest one I've got, actually, which I remember Susan telling me about, which was probably when I was like 7. I wasn't even here, but was she rang a tenant one year, and it was this time of year. I think it was she rang them in January to chase rent arrears, and his genuine excuse was, I've overspent at Christmas. I prioritise Christmas presents. And I think Susan sat there and thought, but what about your house?
Yeah.
Not thought about the rent.
Yeah.
So I think that's quite funny.
Yeah.
That I kind of respect it, because I think I maybe would prioritise Christmas presents.
Yeah.
I like the honesty as well.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry.
Do you know what?
I've
I
treated
do
myself.
get a few. They're very honest. I had one lady once who said, oh, my grandson's just had his birthday. I couldn't not buy him any presents. And I thought, do you know
Fair
what?
play.
Yeah. How much have you
poor
spent on
little
him?
boy- Yeah, that poor little boy's face if he didn't have any presents.
Yeah.
But
Then you put your phone down and you're like, what am I going to say to the landlord?
yeah, they are very open and honest sometimes. We had one recently to say, is it okay if I pay my rent late because I've just got married and I'm on my honeymoon?
It's the best way, though, to be honest, because
well,
at
do you
least
know
then the
what?
expectation for the landlord is set, isn't it?
Yeah.
Otherwise, on the flip side, bank fraud is the biggest one I hear. Oh, I've had fraud on my account. It's been frozen.
Oh, we get that for CCJs, don't we?
Yeah.
Not my
It
CCJ.
wasn't me.
Not mine.
It wasn't me. Okay, who was it then?
Mine. It wasn't my car. Right. I wasn't driving
always
it.
an ex-partner, always.
Yeah.
My ex-partner did it.
Or
Oh,
CCJ because of a
Yeah.
divorce. IVA because of a divorce, which, to be honest, probably are very true.
Yeah.
Sometimes, but
Because
sometimes
when
you
you
sat
are
on the
married,
phone.
it is, that responsibility.
Sometimes you
taking
can
it
tell.
on.
You can tell on the
Oh,
phone
yeah.
where you stuttered there a little bit.
Yeah,
Or
I've
I
had
moved
one.
house and
I've
I
had
didn't
one
cancel
tenant.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've had one tenant. He's had an MOT on his car 3 times this year.
Oh. Does he know that you don't have to do that?
Oh,
He could have saved some money there.
Yeah, whole garage of
he's-
cars.
I think he forgets what he tells me the last time, you see. So, yeah, all my cars had to go in for an MOT. What, again?
We
Picking
did
his
have-
excuse off his phone, like, oh, I think use that
Googling.
one.
Cross that one off, cross that one off.
We did have once, I think it was a couple of years ago, maybe last year, someone, I'm actually not sure whether it was in regards to rent arrears. It must have been. They were chasing for rent arrears, and she said that her granddad had passed away and that she was really struggling. And obviously in those situations, again, we get genuine situations where someone's close family has passed away and the effects that that's had on them, maybe they've not been at work or things like that. So there are genuine situations. But then I remember when Jane chased it the month after, then her mum had passed away. And they're the stories that I think really hit when you just think you're actually at this point, and it kind of boils back down to that being open and honest. And you know, if you've not been to work because you've been off sick or you've overspent, that's so much better than claiming X, Y, or Z family member has died.
Yeah.
And then maybe in 5 months' time, when we come to discuss something completely different, and you mention that your mum was helping you out, but 5 months ago she passed away. They're the ones that I think they're definitely the ones that, again, a bit of a pet peeve for me. The ones that I really don't like. Because it's not something to lie about, is it?
It's not really, is it?
No.
So just be honest. And I always say that as well. You know, if you're having problems, just talk, because a lot of tenants, they won't even pick up the phone. You know, they won't answer the phone, they won't respond to emails, they do bury their head,
and it's only going to build up.
It's only going to get worse. But I've had a few tenants as well to say, oh God, I feel so much, you know, once they do get in contact and they tell you what the problem is, and I'll say, okay, that's great, thank you for letting me know, I'll pass it on to your landlord, and you know, we've come to an agreement, this is what it's going to be. Oh, thank you so much.
I think normally landlords
feel so much better now.
Normally landlords, obviously, they know their financial position and they know how much it's going to affect them, and I think it's just good to have that kind of that opportunity to have that open conversation and say, well, the landlord's absolutely fine with that, but it can't build or because of X, Y, or Z, and it is that conversation, and it is, again, the maintenance of that relationship.
And you'll
isn't
get
it,
a lot
which
of
you
landlords
want.
as well that say, oh yeah, that's fine, you know, we've not had an issue before, we get things happen from time to time, and then you get other landlords that are like, God, what now? You know, when there is excuse after excuse, and you know, going back onto that relationship and the trust, although you've got a managing agent, you might not necessarily know your tenant. You know, you still have got some form of relationship. You know, they're living in your property and what have you, but it definitely breaks down that trust, and landlords, they tend to then not believe what you're saying. So, and
that's ordinarily when it ends up in section 21, section 8,
exactly,
guarantee claims.
And it's just not worth it anymore for them.
Then the tenant, you know, if they get served notice, well, I won't bother paying then, and they're not realising that the landlord will actually just take you to small claims court. You know, it really,
which happens a lot more often than people think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know, I will always say to a landlord, don't let it go. Take them to court. So
well, like you said, it's most of the time it is a business. Like they're running it as a business. You know, property is one of the best investments.
It's not a large fee. Just it's I think it does depend on the amount that's owing, but it can be something like £65 plus VAT. For a court
to
claim.
Go to small claims.
And just do it. You can do it online.
For the amount of rent that's owing as well, it's a no-brainer.
Exactly. So just always pay your rent, guys.
Pay your rent.
Please.
Pay your rent increase. If you have a question about your rent increase, please ask it. I'm all about, you know, being informed. You've got every right to question it. Perfect. So I just wanted to mention, because I actually said this to James the other day, that I actually didn't know what day of the week the podcast went out. I'm going to guess you two don't know.
I thought it was a Friday.
You know. You didn't know.
I'm just on it.
I'm just here.
I'm just here for the show.
So I did just want to mention, so the podcast is a weekly podcast. We put out an episode every single Friday. Obviously, with it coming up to Christmas, I don't even know the dates of when the last one will be, but we'll do a final Christmas episode, which I'm going to get in there now, so no one can tell me I'm not doing it. We're going to do a final Christmas episode, and then obviously it'll be into the new year, so there may be a couple missed out. So hopefully everyone that's really into this podcast can cope without us.
Cope.
Got it in. So yeah, future episodes. I mean, the whole idea is we get everyone, the whole team, unless they really don't want to be on it, which I think a few of them are desperate to be on it, so it'll be fine. To kind of just share their kind of side of it, and I think how we know what it's like to work here, what it's like to work in the industry at the moment, and you know, we've all got different roles. It's something that I always say to kind of people that start here as well. our roles are quite defined, and the reason for that is because we're true believers in there's so much knowledge to have. If Beth did rent increases, property management, section 21s, do you really know everything about all of those areas? Because you probably don't, and you shouldn't expect people to. So our roles are so defined, so everyone's always got a different input into the pod, which I think is quite nice. We'll touch base on property industry news. I know I mentioned there the renters reform bill a couple of times. I don't think anyone's gagging to get on the podcast to discuss it, so it'll probably be me and Darren having a good old chat about the renters reform bill, which will be quite boring to a lot of people, but it is very insightful. So that one is definitely coming up. But obviously any other industry news, I'll just touch base on the court reform that they're looking at doing as well. So any updates that we've got in regards to that, we'll make sure that's included. Beers and ideas. Does anyone want to just explain what our beers and ideas is, rather than everyone listening to my voice?
I haven't actually attended either yet, so
that's a calamity. That is.
I'm here for the next one. So
how many holidays do you go?
Can't tell you.
Of course you can't. Alex would know.
A midwife appointment that day.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Convenient.
Take morning sickness.
Laws, do you want to mention? Do you want to?
So beers and ideas. It's a new thing that we've introduced. So the last Friday of every month, we have a beer and we throw some ideas out there. So it's just a good way of everybody getting together, obviously relaxing a little bit once you've cracked a beer open, and just throwing some ideas out there. And that can be anything, whether it's ways to improve business, or social media's been touched on quite a lot, isn't it? Morale in general. We might play a game of pool over a few ideas.
But it's a bit of competitiveness there on the pool table, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, especially with the boys. But it's just and again, it's not something that probably a lot of companies do. So
just team building,
just a nice team building experience, and getting some good ideas out there of ways to improve, well, anything really, whether it's service or.
I think so many things change all the time as well.
Yeah.
Both like industry wise and generally what we deal with on kind of a month to month basis. Like I said about rent increases and renewals, and the fact that we're doing more than ever. Is there anything that we can do to make that process better, or anything that? And we must have made God knows how many changes to that process. Because when you're not doing it all the time, the process, it doesn't need to necessarily be as efficient, or you don't come across all these obstacles that are kind of put in the way, or other things like that. So I think it's always good to touch base kind of monthly and actually discuss if there's anything that we can change, because we love a bit. Well, I love a bit of change. I know a lot of people don't, but
I love change.
If you're picking something up, like for example, if you picked up rent increases and you were serving section 13s, but you're doing one off, I do that process like sort of day in, day out. If someone new's doing it, they just kind of do it in the way they have been told to do it. But when you kind of take it over, you think, actually, that doesn't work for me. And the way we do it, it is, I imagine with yourself, if new sort of bills come in or whatever it is, you have to change it to work for yourself in the most efficient way when you're doing it every day.
Yeah.
Perfect.